Appropriations and Adjudication will now come to order. Notice of public hearing was disseminated to all local media outlets via electronic format on September 23rd, with a second notice provided on September the 28th, 2015. Notice of the hearing was also made known on the Guam Legislature's website. This afternoon, we have two bills on the agenda, Bill 182 and 183, both introduced by Senator Larissa Britannia Underwood. And I'll allow her to do the opening statement on 182. We'll do the testimony on that bill and then move to 183.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for working with the Education Committee to hear these bills as early as possible. And thank you for the opportunity to say a few words on Bill 182 and later on Bill 183-33. Recently, the government of Guam received approximately $1.5 million in savings from the refinancing of the 2007-2009 General Obligation Funds. When this information became available, I took immediate action to introduce two bills that would appropriate the savings to the critical needs of public and higher education. So relative to Bill 18283, I introduced this. It appropriates the sum of $250,000 from the initial savings realized in fiscal year 2015, pursuant to Public Law 3360, to the University of Guam for the purpose of addressing the capital outlay projects and maintenance needs in anticipation of the Western Association of Schools and Colleges visit. And so that basically is the background information.
Mr. Chairman and Mr. President. Mr. Chairman, if you wish.
Yeah,
turn on the, just push the button there.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Speaker, Senators, for your continued support of the University of Guam. I want to especially thank you for the support of our students. Over the years, the university has made every effort to direct additional resources into maintaining its facility. The maintenance program is updated during each budgeting cycle. If and when funds become available, they are used on those areas identified as the top priority list during the budgetary cycle. Maintenance in the areas on the priority list that are not funded, unfortunately, are deferred. If the $250,000 appropriation proposed in Bill 182 is approved, the funds will be used to tackle some of these deferred maintenance projects. As stated in Bill 182, the university is undergoing an accreditation review. One of the important areas that the accreditation team takes into consideration is the support for the university by our local government. Your actions here today can demonstrate our local government's dedication to making the University of Guam into a truly great university. I thank you for your support on Bill 182, and I look forward to its passage into law. Again, Sidus Masi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Speaker, Senators, Senator Ada, Senator Agun, Senator Underwood, and Senator Torres. On behalf of the University of Guam, we support and we're very appreciative of the proposed legislation, Bill number 182-33. This legislation, introduced by Senator Larissa Underwood, will appropriate $250,000 to the university from savings from the refinancing of bonds. As indicated to you in correspondence from Dr. Anita Borja Enriquez, UOG Senior Vice President, on September 18, we will use these funds for the replacement of an air conditioning duct system in 5 different buildings at the university, which is crucial not only to student safety and comfort, but to learning. This is especially an opportune time to receive these funds in anticipation of the WASC Senior College and University Commission accreditation visit to the university in April of 2016. This will be preceded by an off-site online review in November of this year. This support by the government of Guam will be interpreted as evidence of strong support by Guam's people and leaders. I will not recount to you what is at stake for the University of Guam in this accreditation review process, but I will a little bit. Suffice to say that accreditation issues have a direct connection to the esteem and confidence in the university by students and the public. The last series of accreditation issues, which were made public in the late 1990s, created serious problems that led to a direct decline of 25% of the student body from a high of 3,894 in 1999 to a low of 2,923 in 2004. It has taken us over a decade to reach the previous high, and we are now officially at 3,991. There is a direct connection between resourcing a university, managing its resources, good governance, accreditation, student confidence, and overall progress. We have been successful in this for several years, and we received a record 8 years of accreditation in 2009. We're now hoping for even more. Situs maasi po di sinapotin Mizu para Universidad Guahan, Universidad Mizu, Universidad. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll allow the sponsor to ask the initial questions, and then I'll have some questions after.
Actually, Mr. President, you had noted about the importance of the university being supported, that we demonstrate that support specifically in relation to the budget that we provide for you. And so I'm just curious, we are now September 30, the last day of our fiscal year. So have you received all the cash that had been appropriated for the university as of today?
As of this hour, of course, we still have 3 hours left in the fiscal year, but as of this hour, we have not received $6.6 million of our overall appropriation of 29.7 from last year for the current fiscal year. We're also, just as I know of interest to the committee, we're also approximately $900,000 behind in the student financial aid program.
So that comes out to 7.5.
That's right.
Thank you. Do you have any?
I don't have any more.
She took my question, so I don't.
You can ask
But
it
I'm glad
again.
not.
I can just reiterate.
Yeah, I'm sure it was.
So, okay, so do you anticipate getting this? I'm sure you've been in communication with...
Yes, of course we're in communication with the Department of Administration. In previous years, the worst that we've ever been is around $5 million. So this, is kind of a new level for us. And it's, of course, it's absolutely the wrong time, because the resourcing of the university was, in the accreditation process, governance is a key issue, quality of programs is a key issue, and of course resourcing the university is a key issue. And we've always been able to make do through careful management of resources, but this is probably the worst situation we've been in several years. But we anticipate that we will get all of it one way or another. It's just that it pushes the timeline for meeting obligations, and it pushes the timeline for hiring of personnel. That's the part that really kind of messes up our planning.
The $900,000, which has to do with the student financial aid. So to what extent are students being affected by the fact that they have not received?
The fact that SFAP has not received the full allotment has been helped by the fact that we have an active pursuit of people who are in debt. So actually, in the past year, we've had a record year. We collected over $1 million from people who didn't previously pay their debts. So it's kind of relieved that. But still, at the end of the day, it will have an effect if this continues.
I don't have any more questions. Senator
Not this time. All right, just to recap, this is for $250,000, and it's going to be utilized for 5 air conditioning ducts.
Right.
In
Systems in 5 buildings.
In systems in 5 buildings. And as of 3 o'clock today, you have not received
6.6 million.
$6.6 million in this current year's appropriation.
And
That'll be
900,000
ending in
in
about
SFAP.
9 hours. And 900,000 in the SFAP. Thank you. All right.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you for your support.
Bill 182 is deemed heard. Bill 183-33. Senator Underwood, do you wish to give an opening statement?
Okay, so Bill 183-33 COR appropriates the sum of $500,000 from the initial savings realized in fiscal year 2015 pursuant to Public Law 33-60 to the Department of Education for the purposes of paying outstanding vendors. And basically that's what Bill 183-33 addresses. So we're ready for...
Thank you. I have two people that have signed up, the chairman of the Guam Board of Education, Peter Alexis Ada, and the Guam Department of Education Superintendent, Mr. John Fernandez. If they please come forward. Okay. Since you got the Phillips Award the other day, you can do anything. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Vice Chair or Vice Speaker Cruz, for extending the invitation to the Board of Education as well as to the Superintendent. Likewise with you, Senator Underwood, Chair of our Education, Senator Ada, Senator Uggan, and Senator Torres. Please allow me to introduce myself as Peter Alexis Era, Chairman of the 7th Guam Education Board Policy, and with me here this afternoon are other board members, Vice Chair Lou Sinicolas, Ms. Maria Gutierrez, and Mr. Ken Chargalov. From the Department of Education, we have the Superintendent of Education, Mr. John Fernandez, Ms. Taling Taigno, Mr. Joe Sanchez, and did I miss anybody? Yeah, okay. Anyway, I am here this afternoon in support of introduced bill or proposed bill 183-33 to appropriate the sum of $500,000 for the Department of Education. If there could be any funds to increase this number, Senators, we really would appreciate it. The vendor payments are behind. Maybe the grand total of this vendor payment could reach as high as $10 million. But if there are others that we must meet on a monthly basis continuously, utilities, water, telephone, trash collection, and also I would not remove the lunch program. Telling tight note will be able to elaborate in specifics to what you really need to know. We are just as grateful to some of these businesses are tolerating with us, but it's just a matter of time, Senators, before they say enough is enough. They too are struggling to survive. They want their money too. They've received the services we deserve to pay them. They already have provided this service. We are required to provide education from pre-K to graduation. Please help us meet what was entrusted to this body. I'll make this short, brief, and right to the point. see what you can do to get our territorial education facilities funds released. Had we gotten this, we may not have to grab the total fund, but we fully understand that there are others needing infusion for their own operation and survival. Allow me to call the superintendent and Ms. Tulling-Titano, who will be much more familiar with the department's financial needs. Senators, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for extending this invitation for us to participate in this afternoon's dialogue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Superintendent.
Hafa and good afternoon, Vice Speaker, Senator Underwood, Senator Torres, Senator Uggan, Senator Atta. Thank you for inviting us here. You have written testimony submitted by me in support of Bill 183-33 to appropriate $500,000 in fiscal year 15 savings to the Department of Education to pay outstanding vendor payments. So, as you recollect with our overall funding situation, when it comes to general funds, we are okay. We're pretty good in just maintaining the communication with DOA and BBMR to get the release of those funds to ensure that we are able to meet our operational needs. The challenge has been very clearly, and we've brought this up in several hearings and roundtable discussions, the shortfall over the past fiscal years that relate to the Territorial Educational Financing Fund, or Facilities Fund, which is predicated on our collection of real estate taxes. So in FY 13 and 14, the cumulative shortfall has reached $13 million. And it's that $13 million shortfall which has contributed to the issues that we have in making timely payment to vendors. So in any given time, I usually use the $6 to $8 million, basically that range to describe at any time if you look at our vendor payables, it's going to range from $6 to $8 million. We have updates that may show a little bit above that, but again, these are snapshots in time. So with that in mind, it looks like half of that amount typically is over the 60-day period, and then the other half within that 60-day period. As we receive funds, we try to meet that challenge of closing that gap. And I know we've had this discussion in the past about trying to pay down the older payables, but at the same time trying to maintain the continuity of services. So in the recent past, you were aware that of our utilities issues, trying to make sure we keep power and water going. And at the same time, we're dealing with the vendors who have payables that are older than 90 days. So it's a juggling act. I do thank Ms. Tulling-Titano for trying to help us move through that vendor payable issue and make sure that we keep our services intact. But the challenge, again, is that $13 million shortfall that we have to manage and hopefully find a solution working with the legislature and the executive branch to deal with once and for all. In the budget process for FY16, we were very excited at the prospect of receiving up to $13 million in a one-time payment to help address that gap. It's become apparent that savings may not be available in FY16 and instead was realized this year. So with the proposal, we certainly would appreciate the $500,000 to help us relieve some of that pressure with regard to our vendor payments. As Mr. Atta said, the amount is higher than that, and further solutions will be needed. And once we're able to make timely payment, it allows us to make the further investments that are needed in our school system. Right now, we continue to cover that shortfall as much as we can. We continue to try to keep services going, but at the same time, it's a significant amount that has to be made up. So with that in mind, I just, again, coming down here to testify in support of the funding and to be able to answer any questions you might have about our current financial situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you provide us with a copy of your vendor, your listing?
So we do have copies we could provide, and while she's providing it, right now the outstanding The total outstanding payables are about $9.6 million, and roughly $4 million of that is over 60 days.
How much do you owe in utilities? You mentioned that
GPA.
you lost power for a couple of hours at the central office.
We had just paid off our GPA bill Monday so that we could, we got a disconnection notice, so we were able to pay off what was owing on Monday.
And that
But
was
we do-
for the month of August?
Yes. And we don't have the next bill in the system yet. But we do also have outstanding amounts to GWA.
And I understand, was it correct that I heard that there was a possibility of losing water at some point?
Right, we've been working with GWA to try to address their balances, so we're also...
And how much is the outstanding to GWA?
Yeah, it's $471,000.
And what's the aging on that?
The oldest is 60 to 90 days, $127,500.
And I'll steal the question from Senator Underwood, and I will ask the question at 3 o'clock on the last day of the fiscal year. How much of the FY15 appropriation has not been received by the Department of Education?
So we did an update as of September 29th, and so our total appropriation was $223.9 million. And of that amount, based on BBMR's information, $223.2 million has been released in terms of allotments. And that allows us to receive roughly $9.3 million in cash from Department of Administration. So the allotments themselves that BBMR they've released 223.2, so short about 700,000 from our total appropriation, and we're in communication with DOA to see if there will be cash to back that allotment.
So you're only short 700,000, is that what I understand?
Based on the allotments that have been released.
I'm not talking about allotments. Cash received from Department of Administration.
Right.
How much are you short?
So the year-to-date expenditures are 213.96, or $214 million. So available funds that can be released as of yesterday are $9.3 million.
So you're short 9.3 from your appropriation.
This is, yes, based on BBMR's release information from yesterday.
So from BBMR's own information, they're short to you 9.3
At this moment, yes, or as of yesterday, yes.
as of yesterday.
Based on the allotments that have been released.
And what was your total appropriation?
232. I'm sorry, 223.
And,
Yeah, I'm not wearing my glasses.
okay. Vanity. I'll hold it here. You mentioned that part of the problem in the past was TEFF. And in our appropriations to you, do we segregate the two and say, of the 232, 220 is general fund and 13 is TEFF? We do? And do they, when they send you money, do they say this is TEFF and this is?
Yes, BBMR sets it up by the different funding sources, whether it's general fund, TAF, passport, or Healthy Future.
And currently this year, what's the shortfall in TEFF for this fiscal year?
What they haven't paid us?
Yes.
3.4. And the 3% reserve is still, they've held 3% of the TEF and 3% of the Healthy Future funds because revenues aren't tracking,
Okay.
is my understanding.
So it's 9.3 for the general appropriations, right? 3.2 for TEFF?
It's
Or
inclusive.
3.4?
So the 9.3 is inclusive of the 3.4.
Okay.
So 5.7. So again, these are based on the allotment release. So what's available to be released to us is 5.8 from general fund and 3.4 from TEF. To make up the majority of that 9.3 million.
Okay. Even if we were to pass this piece of legislation, would there be cash to release to you to give you the 500?
Generally with the general fund, if it's coming out of the general fund, there hasn't been a problem. It's the TEF and the Healthy Future Fund.
But you're short 5.8 in the general fund.
We're working with DOA, and they've assured, and I know we're going to get a check cut tomorrow, and we're meeting with DOA to determine.
Tomorrow's October the 1st.
Yes.
For the next fiscal year. Is the check you're getting tomorrow for the next fiscal year or for FY15?
My understanding is it's for FY15.
Is that for the pay period that's coming up this Friday? Oh, no, pay period was last Friday.
Yes.
Pay day was last Friday.
Yes.
So
We are expecting money for payroll vendors.
For payroll vendors, that would
Right.
be your insurance,
Right.
your retirement fund,
Yes.
withholdings, and whatever else. But
As
that's,
well, we're also hoping for the balance of the general fund, and
how much total was held in reserve from the general fund?
they've completely released the reserve for the general fund.
And they've released, how about TEFF?
They're holding 3% of the TEF and 3% of the Healthy Future Fund. They've completely released the passport.
The total for what's being held in TEF is about 588,000, and then a smaller amount of about 27,000 being reserved from Healthy Futures Fund.
Okay. If we were to be able to get this 500,000 out, what would be the first thing you would have to pay in this vendor list? I mean, with 9 million, that wouldn't even take care of your power bill, or barely keep your water bill current.
As Mr. Addis said, the higher the number goes, the more relief we can get. But again, we would look to the aged payables to attack first. But the issue is if there's any interruption of services that would arise from the other vendors, we would have to balance that out to make sure that we maintain continuity as well. So for instance, GPA doesn't typically go over the 60-day limit, so we typically will prioritize power and water to make sure we try to address that first.
Thank you.
I just had a follow-up question on the TEFF. You mentioned that there's a shortfall right now of 13 million total, and for this year alone, that shortfall is 3.4. But I was wondering, what does that cover a period of that would accumulate to $13 million? Is it over a 4-year period, a 10-year period?
So it would cover 2 fiscal years, FY13 and FY14, where it was a $13 million shortfall. So $8 million in FY13 and $5 million in FY14, based on what actually came in and was collected. With regard to 15, we're not centrally tracking this. We rely on our partner agencies to help us understand where we are. So we're hoping that we're relying on the release of the allotment that from BBMR to indicate when cash should be available to fund the agency. And based on what the information that we have, the allotment release for TEF is $21.6 million as of yesterday, $18.2 million of of expenditures have been recognized, leaving $3.4 million in available funding that could be provided to the agency under the TEF category. So it's really the availability of cash to back the allotment that we're looking at. But the actual shortfall from 13 and 14 at the end of the year, as we close the books, were 8 and 5 for those two fiscal years respectively.
And the reason I'm asking is if you're accounting for that in your budget as a funding source, and you have a historic track of a deficit, then that you would think that there has to be some adjustment. Otherwise, you right size it. Otherwise, you're going to have a perpetual shortfall.
Right. You're absolutely correct. So FY13-14, the issue there, and again, an issue that is also affecting 15, was the revenue projections for real estate tax collections. And the revenue projections, as I understand it, were based on the anticipated revaluation of the tax, which is not yet completed. And so with that expected money coming in, not coming in, as we were spending within our budget, the shortfall became realized, and that affected the timeliness of our payments. So over the past couple of years, the board has asked for supplemental funding to help address it. This year, we were monitoring closely, again, through the 16 budget process. We were looking forward very much to being able to benefit from the Appropriations Act that was passed by the legislature and lapsed into law, that identified one-time savings of around $13 million to hopefully be able to address those vendor payments. So again, we were anticipating a solution. I really, between the legislature and the executive branch, wanting to come down to understand whether relief would be provided. You're absolutely right. If no relief is available, then and the agency must address the $13 million shortfall, that will have an impact on operations. And I think it's important for us that we understand whether that is the case and whether solutions are not on the horizon. Because at this point, with the accumulated deficit, in order to right-size it, we will have to look into the operational budget of the department. And that really is divided between services, contractual services, the bulk of it, utilities, and personnel. And I think that's been an internal discussion of when we need to start pulling the trigger on right-sizing that budget. Obviously, as you know, when we're looking at the school budgets, the issue of being able to provide personnel on site to adequately staff their schools, or to be able to provide materials and equipment to the schools that are needed, that balancing act is very tough. So we're hoping very much for the legislature and executive branch to work with us to figure out how we can relieve this gap. And if we need to make some adjustments within the agency, then we should do so. Now, the challenge, I would say, as a manager is, we look at the appropriations level as a reflection of what's anticipated from a revenue standpoint, and we ensure that we don't spend above that. And we work to ensure that as we're spending, we abide by the appropriations level that's been approved and signed into law. When the cash comes short, even though we may have spent within that budget, we now have to bear the burden of that revenue source not coming to fruition. So unfortunately, we don't project those revenue sources or track it on a day-to-day basis. So that's a difficult piece for us to manage. So I think in this budget, we've got less exposure to TEF in the FY16 appropriations. So not as much of our budget was built on the TEF revenue source, so that we can rely more on the general fund as a source of revenue. And then the TEF amount would be smaller, so that hopefully we don't run into that situation again of under realized TEF revenues.
Right now, you have the fund source for TEF is about 10.7 mil, which is less than what you had in the, okay.
Right, and that's something that we did make clear to the legislature, that if we could be less exposed to the uncertainty of TEF, that would help us ensure that we don't accumulate more in terms of this deficit issue that we are facing from the prior years.
Thank you.
I just wanted to note that we actually have tried to address the 13 million outstanding in our 2016 budget. whereby we were trying to, we noted here in section 7 that half of the, let's see, of the de-appropriated amount for debt service continuing appropriations here, and this is notwithstanding any other provision of law, any unexpended amount of debt service payments appropriated in section 6A and C of this chapter for 2007 Series A Government of Guam General Obligation Bonds and 2009 Series A Bond in the amount of $29,406,113 shall be de-appropriated, the refunding of the debt pursuant to Public Law 3360. Results in fiscal year 2016 debt service payments less than the amounts as appropriate in Section 6. But what it is following this is that we had noted up to $2 million shall be subject to further legislative appropriation subsequent acts pursuant to Public Law 3360, which was the refinancing of the bond. Up to $1 million of that amount in excess of the $2 million is hereby appropriated to the University of Guam for the purpose of addressing the capital outlay projects and maintenance needs in anticipation of the WASC. And of any remaining de-appropriated amount, 50% is hereby appropriated for Department of Public Health as and Social Services as local match for Medicaid. And in another section, the Guam Memorial Hospital, and then the Guam Department of Education for the sole purpose of paying outstanding vendor payments. Now, what has occurred since we had actually passed this was that the University of Guam had tried to contact GIDA to see if they can access the $1 million and how soon they would actually be able to access the $1 million. And they were informed that in the 2016 budget, they don't anticipate having any savings in the 2016 budget. 2016 savings fiscal year. So because of that, when we found out, then we knew that there was some savings in fiscal year 2015. And this is why I proffered this bill and introduced the two bills to try to capture out of the $1.8 million that's readily available, $500,000 for DOE, and then the $250,000 for the University of Guam. But the University of Guam initially had asked for $1 million, and that was what we tried to address in the 2016 budget. So that was actually this action that I had taken was based on that information that was provided to us. Now, just as a matter of clarification, when public law, let's see, it's 3360 was passed, there's a section here that clearly stated the use of the anticipated savings. It states here that the use of funds saved from the fourth series beginning fiscal year 2016, the savings achieved by the government of Guam to the general fund at or above the target reference in subsection A due to the refunding of the government of Guam general obligation bonds, it goes on. It's stating here that those funds would be appropriated. The intent is to help the Guam Memorial Hospital. But that's for the beginning of fiscal year 2016. The money that we are trying to capture right now for the University of Guam and the Department of Education is from the fiscal year 2015 savings. So there is a question about whether we are, if the two bills are going against the intent of the Public Law 33-60. But we had clarified that the language here actually states that the savings that are realized beginning fiscal year 2016 would go primarily for the Guam Memorial Hospital.
Senator,
Yes.
just for clarification, whether I heard what you said correctly, that the legislation that you just introduced was to take care of the 2015 obligations, a vendor payment. So you cannot touch 14? No, can you touch?
No.
That is that what I'm hearing you
No,
say?
that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, now, let me just have, did I also hear you say that you were informed that there is no anticipated surplus
Savings.
savings after 5 o'clock this afternoon?
For the 2016 for fiscal year 2016, as anticipated for this Public Law 3360, right, which was the public law that was passed to authorize the refinancing of the bond. GIDA had informed the University of Guam that they did not anticipate savings in 2016. And we specifically had addressed the needs of the University of Guam and Department of Education and even Public Health in this budget bill for 2016.
Right, and I thank you for the efforts, both in the FY16 budget as well as in this as well. I mean, because it has been an issue that's been brought to the table several times, and everyone is aware of it. We did look at the potential for having $13 million to cover the outstanding debts, and as we covered them, being able to use our current operational budget to fund to fund other investments in the school system. So you can imagine, I was dreaming about these resources, and dealing and really looking at, it's just an opportunity that doesn't come about too often to be able to take that money that was, we've already spent it to cover the gap, and then not have to deal with the debt, that payment on an ongoing basis, and be able to take those resources and invest them in the classrooms, in the resources and materials that we've been talking about over and over about not having enough funding for. So right now we're short. We're just trying to pay out these old debts, but to the extent that we can fill that gap, we'll now have the opportunity to respond to those of our stakeholders who are saying, why don't we have enough textbooks or instructional equipment or materials? So it's that trade-off that happens when we're forced to use those resources that we have now to cover these old debts due to a shortfall that really was not of our making. But we want to work with you and the governor to try to find a way to bridge that gap, and then we can move forward from there.
I do have one other question. I've been reviewing this list. I'm a little concerned about 1.5 being owed to the retirement fund. Did I read that correctly? And what's the aging on that one?
So this payables report includes payroll vendors from the last pay period, and we're hoping to get, as you mentioned earlier, we're hoping to get a check to cover payroll vendors so that we can pay that out tomorrow.
Okay, so I looked at it, and it is just the current one, 1.5, but just so I looked at, because we had to take out a bond to pay prior obligations of GDOE in the past. If there aren't any other questions,
No.
we'll consider Bill 183 heard, and thank Mr. Chairman and Mr. Superintendent and Tolling for your coming and testifying today. The committee will continue to accept any written testimony on this matter for the next 10 days. Please provide written testimonies to the office of Vice Speaker Benjamin Cruz, 155 Hessler Place, Hagåtña, Guam 96910. You can also send it by facsimile to 477-2522 or email to senator@senatorbjcruz.com. Thank you. We stand adjourned.